My name is Sarah Ann, and I just finished reading We Are Not Here to Be Bystanders by Linda Sarsour. It's a memoir of love and resistance. I think there's a lot of value to this book. So now I'm just going to go through my notes and see what I want to remember. This is a quote from page 7. There are people who hate what I represent. I shatter every stereotype they have of Muslim women, whom they seem to believe should be submissive and subservient, unseen and unheard. I am seen everywhere, and I make my voice a megaphone, speaking up for my people to those who would vilify and dehumanize us. I will not sit by and allow my people, your people, anyone's people, to be vilified and dehumanized, because when hate goes uncontested for too long, atrocities happen, as the history of this very country has shown. And so I will keep organizing, building power, and speaking out against injustice, because that is my right and my charge, and because, in the face of hate, it is the ultimate expression of love. And this is page 8. Now, more than ever, we must resist the temptation to hide our light, bide our time to make ourselves appear less formidable than we are. If you ever ask yourself, should I not share the position I hold on this lightning rod issue? Should I shrink myself in certain rooms where my voice is not welcomed? Should I appear less Palestinian, less Latina, less black today? Always the answer is no. We must never negotiate away or compromise our principles and values. Instead, we must bring all our complex identities to the table, transforming those spaces in which any part of who we are is not welcomed, because our country's future, and the world our children will inherit, depends on our courage and commitment now. The following text is from page 73, and it has to do with the Muslim registry program that was happening around 2003. Across the country, other Muslim lives were being similarly disrupted. One Afghani national arrived in Iowa City after being invited to interview for medical residencies there. Since he would not know until the following March whether he'd been matched with the program, he'd gone into the local INS office to file for an extension of his visa. The agents initially confiscated the young doctor's passport, then returned it with a warning that he should leave the country immediately. Shaken, the Afghani doctor booked a ticket to travel a few days later. On the night before he was to fly home, FBI agents barged into the house where he was staying and took him into custody. Inexplicably, they moved him from one detention facility to another for months before finally deporting him. Meanwhile, in San Jose, California, an Iranian-born database manager who had become a Canadian citizen was shackled and flown to a prison in San Diego, where he was incarcerated in a cold, damp cell and forced to sleep on the concrete floor. The reason for his detention: he'd presented himself 2 days after the deadline for an in-call program, for a call-in program that, as a Canadian citizen, he wasn't even sure applied to him. A judge eventually ordered his release. Another man, a naturalized U.S. citizen of Jordanian extraction, who ran an ice cream truck in Chicago, was picked up and held for 14 days. He never did discover the reason for his arrest. When the authorities finally let him go, they kept his naturalization certificate and social security card. He was forced to retain a lawyer for help in getting the documents returned, because now he was part of a world in which men who looked and worshipped as he did might at any moment be asked to prove their right to exist on these shores. This is on page 77. It is difficult to express the degree to which the systematic targeting of Muslims by law enforcement in the weeks, months, and years following 9/11 emotionally traumatized our community. It feels like you're under attack all the time, said one Arab-American man, a 30-year-old plumber with no criminal record who somehow ended up on the FBI's no-fly list for a year. The man had been visited at home numerous times by members of the city's counter-terrorism task force. He believed that agents placed his name on a no-fly list in retaliation for his refusal to be interrogated without a lawyer present. They told me they were watching me, he recalled. They were watching my every move. They knew every contact in my cell phone and every message I sent. They said I would come to regret this and that they were going to take me down. The young man's mental health suffered. He was anxious all the time and even broke off an engagement because he didn't want his fiancée to have to endure what he was going through. The tool of fear, it definitely works, he told a reporter for The Guardian. You can't even turn to the authorities. They are the ones doing it. I know I am supposed to have rights as a citizen, but I think they have a different rule book for people like me, for Muslim Americans. This following text on page 88 has to do with Besma, or Besma, and this person was a mentor and a friend and a, very popular community figure in Linda's life. More than any person on this earth, this brilliant and beautiful woman helped me find and use my voice. My parents described me as the good child, the responsible firstborn daughter who set an example for her younger siblings and made no waves. Besma taught me to make waves, to stir the pot, to raise holy hell when things didn't sit right or when individuals or communities were in trouble. It would be impossible for me to explain why I do this work without first sharing the life-changing experience of just being at Besma's side. The following is just a story, an excerpt from a story that Linda tells from her experience with March to Justice, where she and many other organizers and non-organizers marched from Washington to New York City in 2015. And this story is from the day where they had just learned about Freddie Gray being murdered, and they changed their route to join the mourners and protesters in Baltimore. The streets we walked through in the Western District were more desolate than anything I'd ever witnessed, with buildings blown out, windows shattered, doorways boarded up, and potholes as deep as my thigh. Being from Brooklyn, I'd seen poverty, but nothing as bleak as this. We passed an elementary school with every window covered by plywood, yet the school was open for business. And on blocks where every building seemed abandoned, there might be an elderly person sitting out on the stoop, or a mother walking with her children, clues that some of the crumbling, roofless structures still housed residents. The following is on page 226, and it's a recounting of a speech she gave. I decided to use my platform that evening to honor 3 white American heroes in Portland, Oregon, who had stepped up a week before to defend 2 young women of color, one of them wearing a hijab. A white man on a commuter train had been hurling ugly racial slurs at the women, cursing Islam and threatening their lives. 3 men, also white, had tried to reason with the raging passenger, placing their bodies between him and the women. As the train pulled into the next station, the angry passenger lunged and stabbed each man in the neck before running away. The other commuters called the paramedics and stayed beside the men, 2 of them mortally wounded. I said their names. Rick Best was a 53-year-old military man and father of 4. 23-year-old Taliesin Mirden Namkaimeche had recently graduated from Reed College. His smile in photographs was joyful. As he lay dying, a black woman, a single mother of 5 on her way to community college classes, knelt at his side. She removed her tank top and pressed it to Taliesin's neck, whispering, "Stay with us. What you did was pure kindness. You are such a beautiful soul." Soon the medics arrived. As they placed him on a stretcher, he said to the woman, "Tell everyone on this train I love them." They were his last words. The third man, a 21-year-old poet by the name of Micah David Cole Fletcher, mercifully lived. The following is from page 204, and it is the Women's March Unity Principles. We believe that women's rights are human rights, and human rights are women's rights. We must create a society in which women, including Black women, Indigenous women, poor women, immigrant women, disabled women, Jewish women, Muslim women, Latinx women, Asian and Pacific Islander women, lesbian, bi, queer, and trans women, are free and able to care for and nurture their families, however they are formed, in safe and healthy environments free from structural impediments. Okay, so this next section, I finished going through my notes and reading large passages. I've made another set of notes, just kind of organizing some main points or takeaways I had from this book. So the first one has to do with family and how it's a recurring topic in Linda's story, in her values, what she talks about. Then I have a note about her relationship with her husband and the way that I responded to that narrative. I have something questioning neocolonial actions and I suppose patriotism of a sort. Just questioning the desire to redeem a nation and the nation of the United States. And then I have some thoughts on having a visible identity in the world, which is what Linda says about wearing a hijab. And so that was really interesting to me, so I'm going to touch on that. And I have a note on safety and feeling safe and how spirituality and religion factor into our expectations for our lives and the way we behave and communicate with other people. And then I have these two quotes that don't have larger sections, so I'm just going to read them now. I actually thought that cops brandishing guns inside a public school building was normal. It's from page 42. Then, all our work was, first and foremost, about caring what happens to other people. That was from page 105. I think the last, quote from the text that I read, the Women's March Unity Principles, it's combining, the freedom of women and their freedom and ability to care for and nurture their families. And so I'm thinking of how, a lot of the activism that's talked about in Linda's story, and I think beyond her story as well, though I'm not, well-versed and have taken a large, thorough survey of revolutionary organizing, depends on the family unit to organize themselves. And, I don't know if this is my own personal background coming up or if it's something more shared, especially among millennials, but I think family and organizing ourselves around the next generation can seem challenging. Just talking to other people who are generations above me, someone who's 50 years old, I was talking to, and he was saying that, he didn't know if he would have kids now, because of just the way that the future is predicted to be. And so, organizing around the future of our children, I think, is a point where I don't quite relate to it. And so I think that's interesting when it comes to organizing and revolutionary strategies, of appealing to the family haver, the person who participates in family activities, family organization as reason to engage politically and be in social organizing. And so, I just have this note that, Linda is a mother. She's a family woman, and in the same way you'd say, a family man. And several times through the book, family relation is used as evidence of goodness in a person. So, innocent family man is used to talk about someone who was killed by police. And so talking about social justice and preservation of life. Another thing that she talks about, semi-related, she talks about missing her family and the guilt and challenge of movement work and being there for her children. So I think that's, it's not my story, but I think it's really interesting, just, the mother or the father or any kind of parent, guardian who has dependents, who has people that depend on them, who they have a responsibility to take care of. Me, I'm 26, and, I feel responsibilities towards family members, but not in a way where, I have a child who I'm the sole kind of caretaker for, and how that kind of caretaking is different from the caretaking of, say, black people, black femmes, queer women. The different kind of identities that you have and how you identify in each, and something along those lines. This quote, "The world our children will inherit," and this presumption or pretense of children and doing things for the next generations. The next thing I want to talk about, and this is going to be a little disorganized, but her relationship with her husband. So they were married before she really stepped into this community organizer role. And from what she's written about, it seems like, he's not first lady, first husband type person. It seems like he's not a community organizer. And, I don't know if I have a more romantic view, whether it's been conditioned or, built up in some other way, of sharing my deep values, the values that other people value in me, things that get written about in books, to not share that kind of interest or identity with your partner. And, I feel it on a very kind of macro personal level of, the friends I have and the way that I spend my time, and wanting to share values. And I don't doubt that Linda's husband shares many of her values, but it's interesting how we choose people to be with. And for her, Islam and Palestinian identity were more important than having an identity outside of that. That kind of identity was strong for her. And it's just interesting because it's a point where I don't relate. And so I'm curious. Let me see my notes. It wasn't really a romantic story, and I don't know if I'm a sucker for romance. I don't really think so, but I think I kind of maybe expected that in this book, which I identify kind of not a lot of, but just some respectability politics going on, and wanting to present very clear, neat, kind of like, not quite American approved, but, things that appeal to an American sensibility. I think I'll talk more about that later. Okay, so my next notes. I'm not sure if this is what neoliberal / neocolonial means, but redeem the soul of America is a phrase that Linda, presents near the end of the book as something to organize around. Redeeming the soul of America is like a mission and a project to maybe ground your intentions in. And to me, that's very unappealing. So Linda seems to believe that the U.S. can be a force for good. She claims it as her home. She cares for, quote, our country's future. There's this quote, perhaps they would accept, finally, that people who look like me also call America home, and we love our country as much as they do, and we want her to thrive. I feel like I don't know what our country means. This idea of having a country, I don't feel like I have an ownership of the United States. Sometimes I do think of the relative privileges that I have living in the United States, living in Iowa, living where I do, as I do, but all the ways that it implicates and the ways that we're entangled in violent systems, where just privilege is tricky, but we love our country as much as they do. Just that term of our country, I think, must be so different between these, MAGA or Trump supporters that she's talking about in this quote, and her, what she thinks our country is versus what they think our country is. I'm just very curious as to how you reconcile those ideas or feel that you are of this place, and that that attachment to this nation. The next little quote I have is, "All my life I had yearned for a visible identity in the world. That was the day I began to feel whole." She's talking about the first day that she decided to wear a hijab. And I think this is just really interesting in relation to what makes someone feel whole. Having a visible identity. And it made me think of monk robes. It makes me think of swastikas. It makes me think of tattoos. It makes me think of the ways that people choose to identify and how that can be a fulfilling way to be, a way of communicating who you are. And whether that's, whether that's part of wholeness, whether that's part of feeling like you're like a satisfaction in your existence is being visibly having your values so obvious. So this last part is talking about safety and feeling safe. So this is a spiritual related question. So I've heard these terms, hell on earth, or we're already in hell, or this is hell, this experience, this existence that we're living. It's not that heaven or hell is next, but that we are in hell. And maybe there's some other kind of practice that can extract us into the world of the living, into hell, into heaven, or if this is purgatory. These are terms that not everyone is familiar with. This idea of hell isn't, it's very rooted in maybe a Christianity or Abrahamic. I don't really know my terminology of this. But, thinking of our lived experience now, this one where I talk to a screen and you watch me or listen to me, that this is hell. And, what do you do in hell? Do you be a heathen? Do you seek pleasure? Do you behave like you deserve to be in hell? Or do you behave as if you are in heaven? Do you behave as if you might ascend? Do you behave as if you are here forever and you deserve to go through this many iterations of being in hell? Is there this place where you don't suffer? I just think those questions of safety and spirituality and religion are really interesting. And what made me think about it in relation to this book is she's talking about the feeling of safety that she's experienced and the feeling of being in danger and her family being in danger. And she also talks about Black children feeling safe and how inaccessible maybe that feeling is for some Black children in the United States. And I just question this expectation, and I'm curious about how other people think about safety and whether it's something that you can demand or something that you feel you have a right to, and how these ideas of safety change over time. When did the word safety get incorporated into language, into organizing? At what level? How does it get used in different faith communities? What is safety? Who feels comfortable using that word, safety? Who feels comfortable demanding safety or saying that they should feel safe in a given situation? Where do we expect to feel safe versus where do we expect to be on guard? I just think it's an interesting question, and relating it back to Linda's story, she talks about 9/11. Her mother told her not to wear a hijab, or her mother took off her hijab because it wasn't safe. And I just wonder about what we do for safety, how we compromise ourselves, or interfere with the behaviors of others to reestablish or establish a sense of safety. So I'm just curious of what safety means to certain people. Those are my notes. That's my recap of reading this book. We are not here to be bystanders. I enjoy reading a memoir from time to time because it just feels like you get to know someone and get to know the way that they think of their lives and organize their story. Yeah, I enjoyed this. So I hope you got something out of this review, and feel free to interact in the comments below. Give me some of your thoughts in response to my thoughts. And that sounds exciting. So, bye.